The scorching wind whipped across the barren plains as Katherine Morgan clutched her ragged shawl tighter, stumbling toward the distant lights of Redemption Creek. It was 1875, and she had nothing but dust in her pockets and desperation in her heart, one more forgotten soul in a land that forgave no weakness. Fort Laramie, Wyoming territory, had spit her out like so many others before her. Katherine had been left with nothing after her husband died of fever at the fort. 3 weeks of begging for work had yielded nothing but contemptuous stares and doors slammed in her face. The respectable women whispered about the widow with no family connections, and the men offered only the kind of work that would strip away what little dignity she had left. Her stomach twisted with hunger as she approached the small settlement. The last of her food had run out 2 days ago, and the 10-mile walk from Fort Laramie had nearly depleted what remained of her strength. The thought of begging for scraps again made her eyes burn with humiliation, but pride wouldn't fill her belly. Redemption Creek consisted of little more than a dusty main street flanked by wooden structures, a general store, a saloon, a small church, and scattered houses. Katherine paused at the edge of town, gathering her courage. The setting sun cast long shadows across the rutted dirt road. The saloon doors swung open, spilling yellow lamplight and raucous laughter into the street. A group of cowboys emerged, their voices carrying on the evening air. Katherine ducked into the shadow of a water trough, not wanting to attract their attention. As the men dispersed, one remained, leaning against the hitching post. Tall and broad-shouldered, he stood apart from the others not just in his position but in his bearing. Even in the fading light, Katherine could see he was watching her. She turned away, heart hammering. She didn't need more trouble. A woman alone already invited enough danger in these parts. "Miss." His voice was deep with the slightest rasp to it. "You look like you could use some help." Katherine didn't turn. "I'm fine, thank you," she managed, though her cracked lips and parched throat made the words sound feeble. She heard his boots on the dirt, approaching slowly. "No offense meant, madam, but you don't look fine. You look half starved and dead on your feet." Katherine finally turned. Up close, the man was even more imposing, over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry a wagon wheel. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with deep lines etched around eyes the color of a summer sky. A thick beard, streaked with gold in places, couldn't hide the firm set of his jaw. He wasn't young, perhaps in his mid-30s, but he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "I don't need charity," she said, straightening her spine despite the exhaustion that threatened to buckle her knees. His eyes swept over her, not in the way men usually looked at women, but with genuine concern. "Everyone needs help sometimes, madam. I'm Kade Wilson. I own the Circle W Ranch just outside of town." "Katherine Morgan," she replied, the habit of propriety making her respond despite her wariness. "Mrs. Katherine Morgan." Something in his expression softened at the Mrs. "There's a boarding house down the street," he said, nodding toward a 2-story building with a sagging porch. "Mrs. Hanson runs it. She's a good woman. I can pay for a room for you tonight." "Why would you do that?" Katherine asked, suspicion edging her voice. "Because it's getting dark and you look like you're about to collapse," he said simply, "and because I've been where you are once upon a time." Katherine wanted to refuse. She'd learned the hard way that nothing came without a price. But her legs were trembling with fatigue, and the thought of a real bed instead of hard ground was too tempting to resist. "I'll pay you back," she said firmly. "Every cent." A slight smile lifted the corner of his mouth. "I don't doubt it, Mrs. Morgan." Kade escorted her to the boarding house, keeping a respectful distance. When they reached the porch, a plump older woman opened the door before they could knock. "Kade Wilson," she said, hands on her hips. "What kind of trouble are you bringing to my doorstep this time? Evening, Mrs. Hanson," he said, tipping his hat. "This is Mrs. Morgan. She needs a room for a few nights. I'll cover it." Mrs. Hanson's shrewd eyes assessed Katherine, taking in her dusty clothes and gaunt face. "You hungry, girl?" Katherine wanted to deny it, but her stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. Heat flushed her cheeks. "I've got stew on," Mrs. Hanson said, stepping aside to let Katherine in. "Been simmering all day. Room's $5 a week, meals included." That's fine, Kade said, pulling out his wallet and counting out bills. I'll pay for 2 weeks. Katherine started to protest, but he shook his head. Consider it a loan if it makes you feel better. Mrs. Hanson took the money, then fixed Katherine with a stern look. Your skin and bones, girl, get in here and eat. Katherine glanced back at Kade, who remained on the porch. Thank you, Mr. Wilson, he nodded once. Get some rest, Mrs. Morgan. Things will look better in the morning. As he turned to leave, Katherine called after him. How will I find you, to repay you? Everyone knows where to find me, he said with a small smile. Just ask for the Circle W. After he left, Mrs. Hanson ushered Katherine inside. The boarding house was simple but clean, with a large common room dominated by a stone fireplace. The smell of beef stew made Katherine's mouth water. Sit, Mrs. Hanson ordered, pointing to a wooden table. I'll bring you a bowl. Katherine obeyed, too exhausted to do anything else. When the stew arrived, thick with vegetables and chunks of beef, she had to force herself to eat slowly. So, Mrs. Hanson said, sitting across from her, how do you know Kade Wilson? I don't, Katherine admitted. We just met. He offered to help. Mrs. Hanson's eyebrows rose. That's so. Kade doesn't usually take to strangers, keeps to himself mostly, except for business. I'm sure he was just being kind, Katherine said, uncomfortable with the woman's scrutiny. Kind, yes. Impulsive, no, Mrs. Hanson studied her with renewed interest. Where are you from, Mrs. Morgan? Pennsylvania originally. My husband and I came west last year. Katherine's voice faltered. He died at Fort Laramie, fever. I'm sorry to hear that. Mrs. Hanson's tone softened. Many don't make it out here. It's a hard land. Yes, Katherine agreed quietly. It is. After she finished eating, Mrs. Hanson showed her to a small but clean room on the second floor. There was a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a battered chest of drawers. Bathrooms at the end of the hall, Mrs. Hanson said. Breakfast is at 7. Don't be late or you'll miss it. When the door closed behind her landlady, Katherine sank onto the bed. For the first time in weeks, she was warm, fed, and safe. Tears she'd been holding back for too long spilled down her cheeks as she clutched the quilt in her fists. She had 2 weeks. 2 weeks to find work and a way to survive. 2 weeks before she'd be homeless again. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she felt a strange calm. She would find a way. She had to. Morning came too soon, sunlight streaming through the thin curtains. Katherine washed with cold water from the pitcher, wincing as she scrubbed the grime from her skin. Her dress was wrinkled and travel-stained, but it was all she had downstairs, Mrs. Hanson was already serving breakfast to 3 men ranch hands by the look of them. They glanced up when Katherine entered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open appreciation. Morning, Mrs. Morgan, Mrs. Hanson called. Sit anywhere. Coffee's hot. Katherine chose a seat at the far end of the table, nodding politely to the men before focusing on her plate. The eggs, bacon, and biscuits were the best meal she'd had in months. You looking for work, madam? One of the ranch hands asked. Yes, Katherine replied cautiously. Do you know of anything available in town? Depends on what you can do, another said, eyeing her hands. You ever work as a laundress? I've done all kinds of work, Katherine said. Laundry, cooking, sewing. I was a school teacher back east, Mrs. Hanson, overhearing, came over with the coffee pot. School teacher, you say? Interesting. This town could use one, but the council won't fund it. Say there aren't enough children to warrant the expense. There's at least 15 kids in town now, one of the men said. More on the ranches nearby. And growing every month, Mrs. Hanson agreed. Problem is, no one wants to pay for education when they need hands for work. Katherine's mind was already turning over possibilities. Perhaps I could start something small, charge a modest fee for each child. Mrs. Hanson shrugged. You could try. Talk to Reverend Parker at the church. He might let you use the building in the afternoons. After breakfast, Katherine made her way to the small white church at the edge of town. Reverend Parker, a thin man with kind eyes, listened to her proposal with interest. It's a fine idea, Mrs. Morgan, he said when she finished. The children here need education, but I must warn you, many families can't afford to pay much, if anything at all. I understand, Katherine said. I was thinking perhaps $2 a month per child, less for families with multiple children. The Reverend scratched his chin. It could work. You're welcome to use the church from 1 to 4 each afternoon. We have some old books in the back room you can use as well. Encouraged, Katherine spent the rest of the morning walking through town, introducing herself to shopkeepers and families with children. Some were receptive to the idea of schooling, others dismissed her outright. By midday, she had promises from 4 families, representing 7 children in total. Feeling more hopeful than she had in weeks, Katherine stopped at the general store to ask about purchasing paper and pencils. The storekeeper, a sour-faced man named Jenkins, barely looked up from his newspaper. "School supplies cost money," he said flatly. "You got any?" Katherine's cheeks burned. "Not yet, but I will soon. I'm starting a school," Jenkins snorted. "Heard that before. Last teacher gave up after a month, went back east where she belonged." The bell above the door jingled and Jenkins's demeanor changed instantly. "Mr. Wilson." "What can I get for you today?" Katherine turned to find Kade Wilson standing in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the sunlight. His eyes found hers, and something that might have been pleasure flickered across his face. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, tipping his hat. "Good to see you looking better today." "Thank you again for your kindness, Mr. Wilson," she said. "I was just asking about school supplies. I'm planning to start teaching at the church." Kade raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? You're a teacher?" "I was, yes," Katherine said, "before I came west." He turned to Jenkins. "Put together whatever Mrs. Morgan needs for her school, paper, pencils, slates, whatever she asks for, add it to my account." Jenkins's eyebrows shot up. "Of course, Mr. Wilson." "That's not necessary," Katherine protested. "You've already done too much." "Consider it an investment in the community," Kade said. "My foreman has 3 children who could use some education. They'll be your first students." Katherine felt a mixture of gratitude and unease. She didn't want to be indebted to this man, no matter how genuine his help seemed. "I insist on repaying you once I've established myself." A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "As you wish, Mrs. Morgan." Jenkins began gathering supplies, watching them with undisguised curiosity. "You staying at Mrs. Hanson's?" Kade asked. "Yes, for 2 weeks," Katherine replied. "Until I can find more permanent arrangements." Kade nodded thoughtfully. "My sister-in-law, Franny, runs the household at Circle W. She could use help with the sewing and such. It would be a few hours a week, but it pays." Katherine couldn't hide her surprise. "Your sister-in-law?" "My brother's widow," Kade explained, a shadow crossing his face. "He died 5 years ago. Franny stayed on to help run things." "I would be very grateful for the work," Katherine said. "Good. I'll send someone to fetch you tomorrow morning if that suits." "It does, thank you." After Kade left, Jenkins handed over a generous supply of school materials, his manner notably more respectful. "Didn't realize you were a friend of Mr. Wilson's," he said. "I'm not," Katherine replied. "We barely know each other." Jenkins gave her a skeptical look. "Kade Wilson doesn't extend credit to strangers, madam. Not ever." Katherine pondered this as she walked back to the boarding house, arms full of supplies. Why had this man taken such an interest in helping her? She'd encountered few acts of genuine kindness since her husband's death. Most offers of help had come with strings attached, usually the kind that would have her sacrificing what remained of her dignity. But there was something different about Kade Wilson. His eyes held no hidden agenda, no calculating assessment of what she might offer in return. It was disorienting to be treated with such straightforward decency. The next morning, a wagon arrived at the boarding house driven by a boy of about 16. He introduced himself as Tommy, one of the ranch hands from Circle W. "Mr. Wilson sent me to fetch you, madam," he said, helping her up onto the seat. "It's about 5 miles out." The journey took them west of town, through rolling grasslands dotted with sagebrush. As they crested a hill, Katherine saw the ranch spread out below them, a large main house, a bunkhouse, several barns and corrals, all nestled in a valley with a creek running through it. Cattle grazed on the surrounding hillsides, and in the distance, she could see riders moving among the herds. "It's beautiful," she said. Tommy nodded proudly. "Best ranch in the territory. Mr. Wilson built most of it himself after he came back from the war." "The war?" Katherine asked. "Yes, madam. He fought for the Union. Don't talk about it much, though." As they approached the main house, Katherine saw a woman step onto the porch. She was perhaps a few years older than Katherine, with dark hair pulled back in a simple bun and a practical calico dress. "That's Mrs. Wilson," Tommy said, "Mr. Kade's sister-in-law." The wagon pulled up to the house and Franny Wilson came down the steps to greet them. Up close, Katherine could see that she was attractive in a no-nonsense way, with intelligent eyes and laugh lines around her mouth. "You must be Mrs. Morgan," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Franny Wilson. Kade told me about you. Welcome to Circle W. Thank you for having me," Katherine replied, liking the woman immediately. "I appreciate the opportunity to work. Come inside, we'll have some coffee and talk about what needs doing." The interior of the house was surprisingly refined for a ranch so far from civilization. The furniture was solid and well made, the floors covered with woven rugs, and the walls adorned with a few good paintings. It spoke of prosperity but not ostentation. In the kitchen, a large, sunny room at the back of the house, Franny poured coffee and set out a plate of cookies. "Kade says you're starting a school in town," she said. "That's commendable. Children out here miss out on too much education." "It's what I know how to do," Katherine said simply. "Though I'm grateful for any other work I can find as well," Franny nodded. "We need help with mending and sewing. The Cowboys are hard on their clothes and I can't keep up. Also, Kade mentioned you might be willing to give reading lessons to our cook, Miguel. He's eager to learn but embarrassed to attend school with the children." "I'd be happy to teach anyone who wants to learn," Katherine said. "Good, now let me show you the sewing room." As they toured the house, Katherine noticed numerous signs of a female touch curtains at the windows, cushions on the chairs, small vases of wildflowers. Franny had clearly made this house a home. "Have you lived here long?" Katherine asked as they entered a small room lined with shelves of fabric and sewing supplies. "Since Kade built it, about 8 years ago," Franny replied. "My husband, James, was Kade's younger brother. They started the ranch together after the war." "I'm sorry for your loss," Katherine said softly. Franny's expression grew distant. "Thank you. It was a long time ago. James wasn't cut out for ranching, really, too reckless, got thrown from a horse trying to break it." She shook her head as if clearing away the memory. "Kade insisted I stay on. Said the place needed a woman's touch, and he was right. Men on their own tend to live like savages." Katherine smiled. "My husband was the same. Left to his own devices, he'd wear the same shirt for a week." They shared a knowing look, the kind that passes between women who have managed men's lives. "Your husband," Franny began carefully. "Kade mentioned he passed recently." "Yes," Katherine said, her smile fading. "At Fort Laramie, we were heading to Oregon." "I'm sorry," Franny said. "It's a hard country for women alone." Before Katherine could respond, they heard the front door open and heavy footsteps in the hall. "That'll be Kade," Franny said. "He usually comes in for dinner around noon." Kade appeared in the doorway, filling it with his broad shoulders. He'd removed his hat, and his light brown hair was tousled, with streaks of gold where the sun had bleached it. He nodded to both women. "Mrs. Morgan, glad you could come. Mr. Wilson, thank you for arranging it. Franny showing you around?" He asked, his eyes lingering on Katherine's face a moment longer than necessary. "Yes, she's been very kind," Katherine replied, acutely aware of his presence in the small room. "Dinner's almost ready," Franny said. "Will you be joining us, Mrs. Morgan? Please call me Katherine." "And yes, if it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Kade said. "And you should call me Kade. Mr. Wilson makes me feel like my father." Over dinner, Katherine learned more about the ranch and its operations. Circle W ran nearly 2,000 head of cattle, employed 15 cowboys full-time, and owned some of the best grazing land in the territory. Kade spoke about it with obvious pride but without boasting. "How did you end up here?" Katherine asked. "Tommy mentioned you came after the war." A shadow crossed Kade's face. "Couldn't go back to Virginia. Too many ghosts. Headed west with James, met a man selling land, and here we are." Kade was an engineer before the war, Franny added. "He designed that irrigation system that waters the South pasture." Kade shrugged off the praise. "Book learning only gets you so far out here. Needed practical skills, too." After dinner, Franny showed Catherine the pile of mending that needed attention. There were shirts with torn sleeves, pants with ripped seams, and several jackets needing new buttons. "You can work here or take it back to town with you," Franny said. "We pay 50 cents a day for sewing work." "I'll take it with me," Catherine decided. "I can work on it in the evenings after school." As she prepared to leave, Kade appeared with a book in his hand. "Thought you might need this for your school," he said, holding it out to her. It was a primer, the kind used to teach children their letters and basic arithmetic. The cover was worn but intact. "It was James's," Kade explained. "He kept it all these years. Said he might need it if he ever had children." The gesture touched Catherine deeply. "Thank you, I'll take good care of it." "I know you will," he said, their fingers brushing as she took the book. On the ride back to town, Catherine reflected on her day at Circle W. There was something appealing about the place, not just the prosperity it represented, but the sense of purpose and community. Kade Wilson had built something meaningful here, something that would last, and there was something about Kade himself that intrigued her. Behind his reserved manner, she sensed a depth of character, a steadiness that was rare in her experience. He reminded her of the mountains in the distance, solid, unchanging, weathering whatever storms came his way. Over the next 2 weeks, Catherine established her small school at the church. By the end of the first week, she had 12 students ranging in age from 6 to 15. Some paid the full fee, others what they could afford, and a few nothing at all. Catherine didn't turn anyone away. 3 times a week, she rode out to Circle W to deliver completed mending and collect new work. Each visit, she stayed a little longer having coffee with Franny, teaching Miguel to read in the kitchen, occasionally crossing paths with Kade. She learned more about him in snippets of conversation and from what others said. How he'd risen to the rank of captain in the Union Army. How he'd nursed his brother through a bout of pneumonia their first winter in Wyoming. How he dealt fairly with his men and never asked them to do work he wouldn't do himself. On her 4th visit, she arrived to find Kade on the porch, whittling a piece of wood. He stood as the wagon approached. "Catherine," he greeted her, the sound of her name on his lips sending an unexpected warmth through her. "Franny's in town today, supply run." "Oh," Catherine said, suddenly awkward. "I brought the mending, I can leave it and come back another time." "No need," Kade said. "Come sit a spell." "It's a fine day." It was indeed a beautiful day in early October, with the aspens turning gold on the hillsides and a crisp clarity to the air. Catherine hesitated only briefly before joining him on the porch. "What are you making?" she asked, nodding toward the piece of wood in his hands. "Horse," he said, showing her the roughly shaped animal emerging from the block. "For Tommy's little sister, birthday's coming up." "It's lovely," Catherine said, genuinely impressed. "You're quite skilled," Kade shrugged. "Passes the time in winter, I'm no artist." "How is the school coming along?" he asked after a moment. "Better than I expected," Catherine replied. "The children are eager to learn. Even some of the older boys who were skeptical at first are showing interest." "You have a gift for teaching," Kade observed. "I've heard the parents talking in town." Catherine felt a flush of pleasure at his words. "It's the only thing I've ever been truly good at." "I doubt that," Kade said, his blue eyes meeting hers. "You strike me as someone who excels at whatever she sets her mind to." The compliment, delivered in his straightforward manner, left Catherine momentarily speechless. In the silence that followed, she became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the faint scent of leather and soap that clung to him, of the way the sunlight caught in his beard. Kade seemed to realize it too, clearing his throat and returning his attention to his carving. "Have you found more permanent lodgings in town?" he asked. "Not yet," Catherine admitted. "Mrs. Hanson has extended my stay at the boarding house, but it's not ideal long-term. Most of the available houses are either too expensive or—" She trailed off, not wanting to complain. "Or what?" Kade prompted. "In poor condition," she finished diplomatically. "Mr. Jenkins offered to rent me the room above his store, but I declined." Kade's expression darkened. "Jenkins is not to be trusted. You were right to refuse." "I gathered as much," Catherine said. "Unfortunately, that leaves few options in town." Kade was silent for a moment, his knife moving steadily over the wood. Then he said, "There's a cabin on the north edge of my property. It was the original homestead before we built the main house. It's small but sound. You're welcome to it if you'd like." Katherine stared at him, taken aback by the offer. "I couldn't possibly, it's sitting empty," Kade interrupted, "has been for years. It's about 2 miles from town, an easy walk or ride. You'd have privacy but not be completely isolated." "Why would you do this?" Katherine asked, genuinely puzzled. Kade met her gaze directly. "Because you need it. Because it seems the right thing to do, and because—" He paused, as if considering his next words carefully. "Because I enjoy your company, Katherine. Having you nearby would be no hardship." The honesty of his answer disarmed her. Since her husband's death, most men had viewed her as either an object of pity or a potential conquest. Kade's straightforward admission of enjoying her company with no expectation attached was refreshingly different. "I would pay rent," she insisted. "A fair amount." "If you wish," Kade agreed. "Though the place needs work, I'd consider it fair if you'd take on some of the improvements yourself." "I'm not afraid of work," Katherine said, smiling. "When can I see it?" "Now, if you'd like. It's not far." They rode on horseback, Katherine borrowing one of Franny's mares. The trail wound through a stand of cottonwoods following a small creek before opening onto a clearing. The cabin sat nestled against a hillside, partially sheltered by tall pines. It was indeed small, just one room with a stone fireplace, a few windows, and a covered porch. The roof appeared sound, though the porch sagged in one corner. Inside, the cabin was dusty but intact. A cast-iron stove stood in one corner, a crude table and chairs in another. A rope bed frame leaned against the wall. "It's not much," Kade said, watching Katherine's face as she explored the space. "It's perfect," she replied, already envisioning how she could make it comfortable. "Truly." "The spring behind the cabin provides good water year-round," Kade explained. "There's an outhouse around back, needs some attention, but it's usable." Katherine moved to the window, looking out at the view of the valley below. "It's beautiful here." "It grows on you," Kade agreed, coming to stand beside her. "First winter, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Everything was so vast, so empty, but now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Katherine understood. Despite the hardships she'd faced, there was something about this wild country that spoke to her soul: the endless sky, the rugged beauty, the sense of possibility. "I'll take it," she said decisively. "When can I move in?" "Need to make some repairs first," Kade said. "Shore up that porch, fix the outhouse, give everything a good cleaning, a week, maybe less." "I can help with the cleaning," Katherine offered. "I'd welcome it," Kade said. "Come out Saturday if you're free, bring whatever you want to make the place yours." As they rode back to the main house, Katherine felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. For the first time since her husband's death, she had something to look forward to, a place of her own, work that fulfilled her, and perhaps even the beginnings of friendship. The following Saturday, Katherine arrived at Circle W with her few possessions packed in 2 trunks. Kade had been true to his word. The cabin's porch was repaired, the outhouse rebuilt, and the interior scrubbed clean. He'd even added a few touches she hadn't expected: shelves along one wall, hooks for hanging clothes, and a rocking chair by the fireplace. "This is too much," she protested when she saw it all. "Hardly anything," Kade dismissed. "Most of it was salvaged from the barn. Had to put those carpentry skills to use somehow." Together, they unpacked her trunks and arranged her belongings. Katherine hung curtains at the windows, simple muslin she'd sewn herself, and placed her few books on the new shelves. By midday, the cabin had transformed from an empty shell to a home. "It needs a name," Kade said as they stood on the porch, admiring their work. "Every good homestead has a name," Katherine thought for a moment. "Harmony," she decided. "Harmony Cottage," Kade smiled, the expression warming his entire face. "It suits it, and you." As autumn deepened into winter, Katherine settled into a routine. Weekday mornings she taught at the church. Afternoons she gave private reading lessons to adults who couldn't attend regular classes, and evenings she worked on mending for Circle W. The money was enough to live simply but comfortably. Living at Harmony Cottage gave her a freedom she'd never experienced before. For the first time in her life, she answered to no one, not a father, not a husband, not a boarding housekeeper. The solitude might have frightened some women, but Katherine found it liberating. Her nearest neighbor was Circle W, and she soon became a regular visitor at the main house. Sunday dinners with Kade and Franny became a tradition. Miguel, the cook, always prepared something special when Katherine came, proud to show off his improving reading skills. As for Kade, their relationship grew slowly but steadily. He was not a man given to flowery speech or grand gestures, but his actions spoke volumes. He made sure her woodpile was always stocked, checked on her during bad weather, and brought her small gifts that showed his thoughtfulness: a jar of honey from a beekeeper passing through, a new book when the general store received a shipment, wildflowers he'd spotted on his rides. Katherine found herself looking forward to his visits, disappointed when ranch business kept him away. She told herself it was natural to enjoy his company. He was kind, intelligent, and one of the few people in her new life who treated her as an equal. But in quiet moments, she admitted the truth to herself. She was falling in love with Kade Wilson. The realization should have terrified her. She'd loved and lost once already, knew the devastating pain of it. And yet, the feeling that grew in her heart when she thought of Kade wasn't fear but hope, tentative and fragile, but hope nonetheless. Winter came early that year, the first snow falling in mid-November. Katherine woke one morning to find the world transformed, a blanket of white covering everything in sight. The beauty of it took her breath away, the pristine expanse broken only by animal tracks, the way the sun glinted off the snow-laden pine branches. She was admiring the view when she heard the jingle of harness bells. Kade appeared on the path riding a sleigh pulled by two matching bay horses. "Morning," he called, pulling up in front of her cabin. "Thought you might need a ride to town. Roads will be tricky for a while." Katherine bundled up in her warmest coat and climbed into the sleigh beside him. He tucked a heavy buffalo robe around her legs, his hands lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," she said, acutely aware of his proximity under the shared blanket. "This is very kind." "Call it selfish," Kade replied, a smile playing at his lips. "I was looking for an excuse to try out the new sleigh." The ride to town was magical, the sleigh runners hissing over the fresh snow, their breath forming clouds in the crisp air, the bells creating a cheerful melody. Katherine couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so purely happy. "Winter was always my favorite season back east," she confessed. "My father thought it strange for a girl to love the cold so much." "Why did you love it?" Kade asked. Katherine considered. "Everything slows down. There's a hush over the world, like it's holding its breath. And there's something honest about winter. It strips everything bare, shows the true shape of things." Kade nodded thoughtfully. "I never thought of it that way. For ranchers, winter is mostly about survival, keeping the cattle fed, the pipes from freezing, the men from killing each other from boredom." Katherine laughed. "I suppose it's different when your livelihood depends on the weather." "Everything depends on the weather out here," Kade said. "But there is a beauty to it, I'll grant you that." In town, Kade helped her down from the sleigh, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "I'll come by at 4 to take you home," he said. "Don't argue," he added when she opened her mouth to protest. "The temperature drops fast after sunset." "It's no time for walking." Katherine taught her classes with an extra spark of energy that day. The children were excited by the snow, and she channeled their enthusiasm into a lesson about weather patterns and the water cycle. When 4 o'clock came, she found herself hurrying to pack up her books, eager for the ride home with Kade. He was waiting outside as promised, the horses stamping impatiently in the cold. This time, he'd added a heated brick wrapped in flannel beneath the buffalo robe, and Katherine sighed with pleasure as the warmth reached her chilled feet. "Better?" Kade asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Much," she replied. "You think of everything." "Not everything," he said, his expression turning serious. "But I try to think of you." The simple statement hung in the air between them as the sleigh glided through the gathering dusk. Katherine's heart beat faster, but she didn't know how to respond. After a moment, Kade spoke again, his tone lighter. "Franny's planning a Christmas gathering. Nothing fancy, just dinner and maybe some music. She's invited half the county, it seems. I hope you'll come. I'd love to, Katherine said. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, Kade replied. Though Franny mentioned she wouldn't say no to some of those ginger snaps you made last month. Katherine smiled, pleased that he remembered. I'll make a double batch. As they approached Harmony Cottage, Katherine was surprised to see smoke rising from the chimney. I took the liberty of asking Tommy to start a fire before we got back, Kade explained. Didn't want you coming home to a cold house. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Katherine deeply. Thank you, Kade, for everything. He helped her down from the sleigh, but instead of immediately releasing her, he kept his hands at her waist, looking down at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Katherine, he began, then seemed to think better of whatever he was going to say. You should go in before you catch cold, she nodded, suddenly unable to form words. He stepped back and the moment passed. Good night, Kade, she managed finally. Good night, Katherine, he replied, his voice low. Sleep well. As December progressed, the weather grew harsher. Heavy snows alternated with bitter cold, making travel difficult. Katherine continued teaching, though attendance was sporadic on the worst days. Kade drove her to and from town whenever possible, and on days when he couldn't, he sent Tommy or one of the other ranch hands. Katherine found herself thinking of Kade, constantly wondering what he was doing, imagining conversations they might have, remembering the feel of his hands at her waist. It was adolescent and foolish, she told herself sternly. She was a grown woman, a widow, not a lovesick girl. And yet, the feelings persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. The Christmas gathering at Circle W was scheduled for December 23rd. Katherine spent the day before baking not just ginger snaps, but also a honey cake and apple tarts. She wanted to contribute something special to the celebration. On the morning of the party, she woke to find fresh snow falling, adding to the already considerable accumulation. By midday, the snow had stopped, leaving behind a winter wonderland. Katherine dressed with extra care in her best dress, a deep green wool that brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes. She pinned her hair up in a more elaborate style than usual, and even added a touch of rose water to her wrists. Tommy arrived with the sleigh at 4 o'clock, exclaiming over the baked goods Katherine carried out wrapped in cloths to keep them warm. Miss Franny's been cooking for 2 days straight, he informed her as they set off. Mr. Kade had to practically order her to rest this morning. Is she unwell? Katherine asked, concerned. Nah, just working too hard. She gets that way at Christmas, says it was Mr. James's favorite holiday, so she tries to make it special. The main house at Circle W was transformed when they arrived. Evergreen boughs decorated the porch railings, and candles glowed in every window. Inside, the delicious smells of roasting meat and spices filled the air, and a large pine tree stood in the corner of the sitting room, adorned with paper ornaments, strings of berries, and small candles. Franny greeted Katherine with a warm hug. I'm so glad you could come, she said, and you've brought half a bakery with you. It's the least I could do, Katherine replied. Your home looks beautiful. Wait until you see Kade, Franny said with a mischievous smile. I made him wear his good suit. He's been grumbling about it all day. Before Katherine could respond, the man himself appeared in the doorway. Kade in his everyday clothes was an imposing figure. Kade in a well-cut dark suit was something else entirely. The jacket emphasized his broad shoulders, and he'd trimmed his beard for the occasion. His hair was neatly combed, though a stubborn lock fell across his forehead. Katherine, he said, his eyes warming as they fell on her. You look lovely. Thank you, she replied, suddenly shy. You clean up rather well yourself. A hint of color touched his cheeks. Franny's doing, said I couldn't host a party looking like I'd just come from the stables. She was right, Katherine said, smiling. Guests began arriving soon after neighboring ranchers and their families, townspeople, and the entire crew from Circle W. The house filled with conversation and laughter as people shed their winter wraps and gathered around the fire with cups of hot cider. Katherine found herself drawn into a circle of women discussing the upcoming spring planting, offering suggestions based on her experience in Pennsylvania. She was explaining the benefits of crop rotation when she felt someone watching her. Looking up, she met Kade's gaze from across the room. He raised his glass slightly in her direction, a private salute that sent warmth flooding through her. Dinner was served buffet style, with long tables set up in the dining room. Miguel had outdone himself with roast beef, ham, vegetables prepared in various ways, fresh bread, and 3 kinds of pie. Catherine's contributions were met with enthusiastic approval, particularly from the children who descended on the ginger snaps like locusts. After the meal, someone produced a fiddle and furniture was pushed aside for dancing. Katherine hadn't danced since before her husband's death, and she initially declined when asked, but Franny wouldn't hear of it. "Nonsense," she said, pulling Katherine to her feet. "Everyone dances at Christmas." So Katherine found herself joining in a lively reel, partnered first with Tommy, then with the blacksmith from town, and finally with Reverend Parker, who proved surprisingly light on his feet for a man of his age. As the music slowed for a waltz, Katherine moved to step away from the dance floor. A hand on her elbow stopped her. "May I have this dance?" Kade asked, his voice low near her ear. Katherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Kade's hand settled at her waist, warm and steady, while the other clasped hers. They began to move with the music, and Katherine was surprised by his grace. For such a large man, he danced with remarkable smoothness. "You dance well," she said, looking up at him. "My mother insisted all her sons learn," Kade replied, "said no woman would marry a man who couldn't waltz properly." "Wise woman," Katherine said with a smile. "She was," Kade agreed, a hint of sadness in his voice. "She would have liked you." The simple statement, delivered so matter-of-factly, made Katherine's heart skip. They continued dancing, moving together as if they'd done so 100 times before. The room seemed to fade around them until Katherine was aware only of Kade, the solid strength of him, the gentle pressure of his hand at her waist, the faint scent of pine and leather that clung to him. When the music ended, Kade didn't immediately release her. "Come outside with me," he said softly, "just for a moment." Katherine nodded, and Kade led her through the kitchen to the back porch. The night was clear and cold, stars blazing overhead in a velvet sky. Their breath formed clouds in the frigid air. "I wanted to give you something," Kade said, reaching into his pocket, away from everyone else. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Katherine unwrapped it carefully to reveal a wooden box, intricately carved with a pattern of wildflowers. "Open it," Kade encouraged. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, was a silver pendant in the shape of a book. Katherine lifted it out, admiring the delicate craftsmanship. "It opens," Kade said, touching the tiny clasp. Katherine opened the locket to find a miniature painting inside, a perfect rendering of Harmony Cottage in spring, with wildflowers blooming around it. "Kade," she breathed. "It's beautiful. Did you make this?" He shook his head. "The box, yes. The locket I commissioned from a silversmith in Cheyenne. The painting is Franny's work." "I don't know what to say," Katherine said, genuinely moved. "Thank you seems inadequate." "You don't need to say anything," Kade replied. "I just wanted you to have something beautiful. Something that reminds you of home." Katherine looked up at him, her eyes shining in the starlight. "Will you help me put it on?" Kade took the pendant, his fingers surprisingly deft as he fastened the chain around her neck. The silver felt cool against her skin, a tangible reminder of his thoughtfulness. "Katherine," Kade began, his voice rough with emotion, "I'm not good with words, never have been, but I need to tell you." He paused, seemed to gather his courage. "These past months having you here have been the happiest I've known in years." Katherine's heart pounded in her chest. "I feel the same," she admitted quietly. "Do you?" Kade asked, his eyes searching hers. "Because I don't want to presume. You've been through so much, and the last thing I want is to add to your burdens." "You could never be a burden, Kade," Katherine said, reaching up to touch his face. "You've been my greatest blessing." Something in Kade's expression shifted, a tension releasing. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, almost reverent. His lips were warm despite the cold air, and his beard was softer than she'd imagined. Katherine responded with a tentative eagerness that surprised her hands coming to rest on his chest. When they finally drew apart, Kade rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the first day I saw you," he confessed, standing by the water trough. Katherine asked, smiling. "When I was covered in dust and half-starved, even then," Kade affirmed. "There was something about you, a strength, a dignity despite everything. I couldn't look away." Katherine was silent for a moment, absorbing his words. "I was so alone then," she said softly. "I'd given up hoping for kindness. And now," Kade asked. "Now I have more than kindness," Katherine replied. "I have a home, work I love, and—" She hesitated, then took the leap. "And I have you." Kade's smile was like the sunrise, slow, gradual, but transforming his entire face. "Yes," he said simply, "you have me for as long as you want." They might have stayed there longer, but the back door opened, spilling light and warmth onto the porch. Franny stood in the doorway, her expression apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, though her knowing smile suggested she wasn't sorry at all. "But people are asking for Katherine. They want her to lead the Christmas carols." Kade sighed, but there was no real annoyance in it. "We'll be right in." When Franny disappeared back inside, Kade turned to Katherine once more. "Will you stay tonight, after everyone leaves? There's something else I want to talk to you about." "Yes," Katherine agreed without hesitation. "I'll stay." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of song, laughter, and shared glances between them. Katherine led the carols, her clear soprano guiding everyone through Silent Night and "O Come All Ye Faithful." Kade watched her from across the room, making no attempt to hide his admiration. As the hour grew late, guests began to depart, bundling up against the cold for the journey home. Katherine helped Franny clear away dishes and put leftover food in the pantry, while Kade saw the last visitors off. When the house was finally quiet, the three of them sat in the sitting room, the fire burning low in the grate. Franny, clearly exhausted but satisfied with the success of her party, soon excused herself. "Don't stay up too late, you two," she said, kissing Katherine's cheek and squeezing her brother-in-law's shoulder. "Merry Christmas." Alone at last, Katherine and Kade sat side by side on the sofa, the comfortable silence of people who understand each other without words. "What did you want to talk about?" Katherine finally asked, her fingers absently touching the pendant at her throat. Kade took her hand in his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I've been thinking," he began slowly, "about the future, about what I want." Katherine waited, giving him time to find his words. "I've been alone a long time," Kade continued. "After James died, I threw myself into the ranch, told myself it was enough, and it was for a while. But then you came along, and suddenly I realized what I'd been missing." He shifted to face her more directly. "I'm not asking for anything right now, Katherine. I know it's too soon, but I want you to know my intentions. I care for you deeply, more than I thought possible. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I want to build a life with you." Katherine felt tears pricking at her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Oh, Kade," she said softly, "I care for you too, so much." "But," he prompted, sensing her hesitation. "But I'm afraid," she admitted. "I loved my husband, and losing him nearly destroyed me." "The thought of risking my heart again is terrifying." Kade nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I know, and I'd never rush you. All I'm asking is that you consider the possibility, that you let me court you properly in the meantime." Katherine smiled through her tears. "Court me?" "Like calling cards and chaperoned walks, if that's what you want," Kade said seriously. "Though I was thinking more along the lines of sleigh rides and Sunday dinners, maybe teaching you to ride better than Tommy." Katherine laughed, the sound full and unrestrained. "I'd like that," she said. "All of it?" Kade's expression softened. "Then that's where we'll start." As Christmas turned to New Year and winter slowly gave way to spring, Kade courted Katherine with a dedication that touched her deeply. He took her on rides across the ranch, showing her his favorite places, the overlook where you could see for 20 miles on a clear day, the hidden valley where wildflowers bloomed earliest, the bend in the creek where the best trout lurked. They talked for hours about books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they'd harbored. Katherine learned about Kade's childhood in Virginia, his complicated relationship with his father, his experiences during the war that still haunted him sometimes. In turn, she shared stories of her own past her strict upbringing in a minister's home, her determination to become a teacher despite her father's disapproval, her brief but happy marriage. With each passing day, the bond between them strengthened. Katherine found herself looking forward to his visits, missing him when ranch work kept him away, thinking of things to tell him when they were apart. The initial attraction had deepened into something more profound: a companionship, a partnership, a meeting of minds and hearts. By April, when the first crocuses pushed through the melting snow around Harmony Cottage, Katherine knew she was in love with Kade Wilson. Not the desperate, consuming passion of youth, but something steadier and more enduring, a love built on respect, trust, and genuine affection. One evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, Katherine finally gave voice to what her heart had known for months. "I love you, Kade," she said simply. He turned to her, surprise and joy illuminating his face. "Katherine," he breathed, taking her hands in his, "I love you too, more than I can say." "I'm not afraid anymore," she continued, her voice steady. "Whatever the future holds, I want to face it with you." Kade's eyes searched hers. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel rushed." Katherine smiled. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The kiss they shared was different from their first, deeper, more assured, full of promise and passion. When they finally drew apart, Kade rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered. "Be my wife, my partner, the mother of my children." "Yes," Katherine replied without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." They were married on a perfect day in June, with wildflowers in full bloom across the ranch. The ceremony took place under the cottonwood trees by the creek, with Reverend Parker officiating. Franny stood as Katherine's maid of honor, while Miguel served as Kade's best man. The entire town turned out for the celebration, along with neighboring ranchers and their families. Katherine wore a simple gown of ivory silk that Franny had helped her make, with the silver book locket as her only adornment. Kade, handsome in a new black suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him on Tommy's arm. Their vows were straightforward but heartfelt, promises of love, fidelity, and partnership that both intended to keep for a lifetime. When Reverend Parker pronounced them husband and wife, Kade kissed her with such tenderness that several of the watching women dabbed at their eyes. The reception lasted well into the evening, with tables set up under the trees, lanterns hanging from branches, and Miguel's feast earning praise from everyone. There was dancing to fiddle music, speeches both humorous and touching, and so much goodwill that Katherine felt wrapped in it like a warm blanket. As the celebration wound down, Kade led Katherine away from the crowds toward the main house, which would now be their home. Franny had moved into Harmony Cottage the week before, insisting that the newlyweds needed the larger house for the family they would hopefully have. "Happy, Mrs. Wilson?" Kade asked as they walked hand in hand. "Completely," Katherine replied, leaning into his side. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You've given me a second chance at happiness, Katherine. I won't waste it." "We've given each other that chance," she corrected gently, "and we have a lifetime to make the most of it." Kade stopped, turning to face her in the moonlight. "A lifetime," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "It still doesn't seem long enough to love you as you deserve." Katherine reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines that years of sun and wind had etched around his eyes. "Then we'll just have to make every day count," she said. As he bent to kiss her under the star-filled Wyoming sky, Katherine felt a profound sense of rightness of coming home. She had lost so much, traveled so far, endured such loneliness. But here, in the arms of this good man who had seen her value when everyone else had forgotten her, she had found more than shelter, she had found belonging. The forgotten woman had become the cherished wife, and the love that Kade Wilson had given her was indeed one that no one could ignore, least of all Katherine herself. 5 years later, Katherine stood on the porch of the main house at Circle W, watching as Kade taught their 4-year-old son, James, to ride his first pony. Their 2-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, sat on a blanket nearby, solemnly arranging a collection of pine cones and rocks. The ranch had prospered under their joint stewardship. Katherine's education and organizational skills had complemented Kade's practical knowledge and work ethic, allowing them to expand their operations and improve their breeding stock. Circle W was now known throughout the territory for its quality cattle and fair business practices. Katherine's school had grown as well. With Kade's support, she had built a proper schoolhouse in town, hiring a second teacher to help with the increasing number of students. Education had become valued in Redemption Creek, with families from outlying areas sending their children to board in town during the school year. Franny still lived at Harmony Cottage, though she spent much of her time traveling now, something she'd always wanted to do but never had the opportunity for, until Katherine insisted she take some of the ranch profits for herself. She had become a favorite aunt to James and Elizabeth, bringing them exotic gifts and stories from her journeys. As Katherine watched her family, a wave of gratitude washed over her. The path that had led her here had been difficult, marked by loss and hardship. But those very challenges had brought her to this place, to these people who had become the center of her world. Kade looked up, catching her eye across the yard. Even after 5 years of marriage, that simple connection still sent a thrill through her. He smiled, that slow, transformative smile that had first captured her heart, and Katherine smiled back, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. Once forgotten and overlooked, Katherine Wilson was now cherished, respected, and deeply loved by her husband, her children, her community, and perhaps most importantly, by herself. The woman everyone else had forgotten had found not just love, but a life richer and more fulfilling than she had ever dared to dream.